All right, everybody, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the world of Indian startups.
It's a wild ride.
It really is, and we're lucky enough to have this awesome guide to help us navigate it. This one's all about go-to-market strategies, specifically for anyone dreaming of making it big in India.
The guide really emphasizes that you can't treat India like one massive, homogenous market. What flies in Mumbai might totally flop in a smaller town.
It's all about understanding those nuances, right? The cultural differences, the
Right.
practical needs, all of it.
Absolutely. Like, imagine trying to launch some super high-tech gadget that relies on lightning-fast internet speeds.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
In a place like Mumbai, yeah, you might find a lot of eager customers. But in a rural village where internet access is spotty at best.
It's going to be a much tougher sell.
Exactly. And the guide uses examples like that to drive home the point that you really got to know your audience, inside and out.
Speaking of knowing your audience, this whole concept of customer personas really stuck with me. It's like we're creating profiles of our ideal customers,
Right.
almost like we're getting inside their heads.
In a way, yeah. But it's not about stereotyping or anything like that. It's about building this detailed picture of who your ideal customer is, their age, their location, their job, their interests, what makes them tick.
So instead of just saying we're targeting young professionals, you might have a persona like Meet Priya. She's 28, lives in Bangalore, works in tech, loves to travel, and is super active on Instagram. Something like that.
Exactly. And the beauty of these personas is that they help you step into your customer's shoes. You start to understand their pain points, their aspirations, what keeps them up at night.
And that's how you figure out what they really need, not just what you think they need.
Exactly. It's about creating solutions that truly resonate with your target audience.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But here's the thing. The Indian startup scene is crazy competitive. I mean, everyone and their cousin seems to have a brilliant idea.
It's true. This guide doesn't sugarcoat that at all.
So how do you stand out?
And it gets to the heart of what the guide calls your value proposition. Basically, what makes your product or service stand out from the crowd? What problem are you solving better than anyone else? They talk about companies like Paytm, Zomato, and Ola, all huge success stories. So Paytm, they kind of revolutionized digital payments in India. They came on the scene when smartphone use was exploding, but a lot of people were still wary of online transactions.
It makes sense, especially with financial stuff. People want to be cautious.
Exactly. And Paytm tapped into that, providing a way for people to make payments, transfer money, even pay their bills all through their phones in a way that felt safe and familiar.
So they solved a real problem at just the right time.
Precisely. And that's a recurring theme with successful Indian startups. They're not just launching cool products, they're addressing genuine needs in the market.
Which brings us back to that whole know your audience thing.
Exactly. It all ties together.
But let's say you've got a killer product, you understand your audience. How do you actually reach them? India's got, what, over 1 billion people? Where do you even begin?
Right. It's not like you can just put up a billboard and call it a day.
Yeah.
The guide really digs into the whole marketing aspect of things. And one thing they emphasize is that in India, you need a mix of online and offline strategies.
So it's not just about social media blitzes and Google ads.
Those are definitely important, especially if you're targeting younger consumers. But you also have to consider traditional media, TV, radio, even print.
It's like you need a multi-pronged approach, right?
Exactly, because the way people consume information in India is so diverse. Someone in a rural village might get most of their news from the radio, while a young professional in Bangalore is glued to their smartphone.
Makes sense. You got to go where your customers are.
Exactly. And the guide gives tons of examples of startups that have found creative ways to do just that. Like, imagine a company selling agricultural equipment. They might set up booths at local markets and festivals.
To reach farmers directly, right where they are.
Exactly. While a fintech startup targeting urban millennials might focus more on social media campaigns and online influencers.
Okay, this is making me realize just how much strategic thinking goes into cracking the Indian market. It's fascinating, but also a little intimidating.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
And speaking of strategic thinking, let's talk about pricing. Because everyone loves a good deal, but I'm guessing it's not as simple as just setting the lowest price and calling it a day.
You're right, it's way more nuanced than that, especially in a market like India. The guide breaks down different pricing strategies: value-based pricing, competitive pricing, cost-plus pricing.
Okay, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of pricing, can you just remind me what those terms even mean again? I feel like I learned this in college, but probably forgot it all.
Of course. So value-based pricing is all about setting your price based on the perceived value your product offers to the customer. It's less about your costs and more about how much your target market is willing to pay for the solution you're providing.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you've got a product that solves a major pain point, you can charge a premium for it because people are willing to pay for that value.
Exactly. Now, competitive pricing, that's pretty straightforward. You're basically looking at what your competitors are charging for similar products or services and setting your prices accordingly.
So you're trying to stay competitive within the market, not necessarily undercutting everyone else.
Right. And then there's cost plus pricing, which is the most basic approach. You calculate your total costs to produce and sell the product, add a markup for your profit margin, and that's your selling price.
Okay, that one seems the simplest, but maybe not always the most strategic, especially in a dynamic market like India.
Exactly. The guide stresses that the best pricing strategy for you will depend on a whole bunch of factors: your target market, your competition, your overall business goals.
Right? There's no magic formula. It's about finding what works best for you.
Absolutely. And being willing to adapt as needed.
You know, flipping through this guide, it really hit me that launching a startup in India, it's not like, okay, we're done, time to relax on a beach. It seems like the name of the game is adapt, adapt, adapt.
You got it. This market is constantly changing. It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly. Consumer preferences, new technologies, even government regulations. It's like everything's in flux all the time.
And the guide, it really drives that point home. They call it iterative development, which sounds fancy.
But what does it actually mean in plain English?
Basically, it means you're constantly testing, learning, and tweaking your product, your marketing, your whole approach based on real-world feedback.
So you launch, but you're also ready to make changes on the fly based on how people respond.
Exactly. And a huge part of that is actually listening to your customers, like really listening.
Because they're the ones on the front lines, using your product, experiencing the market firsthand.
Exactly. This guide, it goes beyond just collecting data. It's about truly engaging with your customers, understanding their pain points, their frustrations, their unspoken needs.
So how do they recommend doing that? Are we talking focus groups, surveys? What's the secret sauce?
Well, they actually highlight the power of social media as a direct line to your audience. It's like this gold mine of real-time feedback. You can see what people are saying about your product, your brand, your competitors.
And it's not just about gathering that feedback. It's about actually acting on it.
Right, exactly. They give a bunch of examples of startups that have completely pivoted their entire business model based on what they learned from their customers.
Okay, now I need to hear an example. That sounds intense.
Okay, picture this. There's this one food delivery startup. They were doing okay, but they started noticing a lot of complaints online.
Uh-oh, what were people saying?
Turns out their platform wasn't very user-friendly for people with dietary restrictions. Like if you were gluten-free or vegan, good luck finding something to eat.
Oh, I can see how that would be a major pain point, especially with food delivery.
Exactly. So the startup, to their credit, they listened. They completely revamped their interface, added tons of filters for dietary needs, the whole 9 yards.
So they turned a negative into a positive and probably attracted a whole new customer base in the process.
Exactly. And that's the kind of agility that this guide is all about, being responsive, being customer-centric.
It makes you wonder, though, with all this talk about challenges and adaptations, why would anyone even want to dive into the Indian startup scene in the first place? It sounds intense.
It's a valid question, but honestly, the potential rewards are just as massive as the challenges. India's startup ecosystem is like this throbbing, dynamic heart full of energy and opportunity. Imagine this. You've got a population of over 1.4 billion people, and a huge chunk of them are young, tech-savvy, and incredibly open to new ideas.
Right, they're digital natives, comfortable with technology, always looking for the next big thing.
Exactly. And here's another key ingredient. India's mobile and internet penetration has exploded in recent years. It's one of the most digitally connected populations on the planet.
So it's like the whole country is going digital practically overnight.
In many ways, it is. And that's created this perfect storm for digital startups, especially in areas like fintech, e-commerce, online education, you name it.
It sounds like the opportunities are endless.
They really are. And this digital boom, it's attracted a ton of venture capital funding. People are eager to invest in Indian startups.
So there's money pouring into the ecosystem, fueling even more growth and innovation.
Precisely. And we can't forget about the Indian government. They've launched all these initiatives to encourage entrepreneurship.
It sounds like they're really rolling out the red carpet for startups.
They're definitely trying to create a supportive environment, which is huge when you're talking about navigating a complex market like India.
It sounds like there's a real sense of momentum, a collective belief that India is on the verge of something special.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting time to be a part of the Indian startup scene, but I'm not going to lie.
What's the catch?
The competition is fierce. I mean, really fierce. To succeed in this market, you have to be on top of your game, constantly innovating and laser focused on your target audience.
Because if you're not, someone else is right behind you, ready to steal your customers.
Exactly. This guide, it stresses that the most successful startups are often the ones that identify a genuine problem that needs solving.
So it's not just about having a cool idea. It's about finding a real pain point, something people are desperately searching for a solution to.
Exactly. And in a country as diverse and dynamic as India, the possibilities are pretty much endless.
This is making me want to pack my bags and jump into the Indian startup scene myself. It sounds exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, the opportunities, the sheer scale of it all.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. But there's one more thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up. This whole idea of trust. It seems like in India, building trust with customers is absolutely essential.
You're absolutely right. That's a huge theme throughout this guide.
Because it's one thing to have a great product, but if people don't trust your brand...
It's going to be tough to break through the noise, especially in such a crowded market.
Exactly. So how do you actually cultivate that sense of trust? The guide must have some insights on that.
They do, and it all boils down to understanding the culture. In India, relationships are everything. People want to do business with companies they feel a connection with, companies they can rely on.
So it's not just about flashy marketing campaigns or the lowest price. It's about
building genuine relationships, being transparent, being reliable. The guide actually uses this word, transparency, over and over again. So imagine you're an e-commerce company, right? You're selling, I don't know, clothing, let's say.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now imagine a customer places an order and for whatever reason there's a delay, maybe the shipment got held up, whatever it is.
It happens. These things are out of your control sometimes.
Exactly. But instead of keeping the customer in the dark, you proactively reach out, you explain the situation, you give them a realistic timeline, you're upfront and honest about it.
Yeah. So you're being transparent, even when it's not necessarily convenient or easy.
Exactly. And that goes a long way in building trust. Because people can tell when you're being genuine, when you're not just trying to brush them off.
It's like you're showing them that you respect them, that you value their business.
Exactly. And the guide also highlights the importance of social proof, especially in a market like India where word-of-mouth recommendations are huge.
Right, because if your friend recommends a product or a service, you're much more likely to try it yourself.
Exactly. And that's why online reviews, testimonials, those are all incredibly valuable in this market.
It's like having a trusted friend vouch for you, saying, hey, I've used this, it's great, you should try it too.
Exactly. And then finally, there's this whole element of consistency and reliability.
Which is important in any market, but especially in India, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Because when you're dealing with a market that's so dynamic, so full of options, people are looking for stability, for brands they can count on.
Okay. So it's not just about delivering on your promises, it's about consistently exceeding expectations, going above and beyond.
Exactly. And that's how you build that long-term trust and loyalty that's so essential for success in the Indian market.
This has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I've learned so much about what it really takes to make it in India.
It's a fascinating market full of challenges and rewards.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Indian startup scene, I have one final thought for all of you listening.
Hit us with it.
Imagine for a moment that you're an entrepreneur, you've got this amazing idea, you're ready to take on the world. Why not India? Why not dive into this dynamic, exhilarating market and see what you can achieve? The possibilities are truly limitless. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep those entrepreneurial dreams alive.